Hey Crosspoint, welcome to our marriage seminar. We encourage you to listen to this with your spouse and grab something to write with. There are discussion questions in the description, so feel free to pause the video and take time to talk through them together. Later in the seminar, we'll also give you time to discuss them. Now let's jump in with our first warning light in the marriage dashboard, the check engine light, or in marriage terms, communication.
What moves the vehicle forward? It is the piece. And so what you'll find is with communication, if we're not communicating, then chances are it's filtering its way into all the other aspects of our marriage, as we get into them. And so this communication piece is something that's really important. It's not something that we naturally just fell into. It's taken a lot of work over the last many years to even be remotely adequate at it. So, it's one of those things. There's still situations that come up and we think, how can we be so far off in what we're thinking? And so it's really important sometimes to make sure that we are truly checking in with each other. And so for us, finding a time, finding something for you. And I think back to when our kids were little and our schedules were busy. We used to just sometimes get in the car and go for a ride. Whatever that looks like for you guys, you have to know when is the right time for communication. We quickly recognize in our marriage that we are very different people. I'm a night owl. He's a morning person. I don't want to talk in the morning. I want a little bit of time to enjoy my cup of tea. And he is up and at it. It's why he's on the radio, because he likes to communicate. I want to warm up a little bit, give me a little time to get my thoughts. And then 10 o'clock at night, I'm ready to go. And he is not. And so finding the time to communicate, that's something I would encourage. Sometimes we have some difficult things. I never like to talk about finances. It was always the thing if I could push off, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But communicating is something that's important to make sure that you're both in the right place, so that you can have that conversation. If you're having a difficult conversation, you want to make sure that it's not at one or the other person's worst time of day.
So when that check engine light comes on and you're trying to figure out, okay, so we've got a communication issue, what does it look like? Well, for each of you and for each relationship, it's going to be a little bit different, right? So it could be silence. Sometimes silence is a good thing, because if you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything good at all. But there's also the silence of where you've got the silent treatment. And if you've been there, you understand. Then on the other side of the things, it could be where there's yelling, or it's just like what is going on? Like that elevated quickly. You hear about the short fuse and it's like, well, what happened? We weren't having an issue and suddenly now the fuse is this big. Something underlying is going on that we need to figure out what's going on. And, sometimes that's an issue. Sometimes it's the I'm fine. Sometimes you are fine. And sometimes that's not going to be helpful in the relationship. Sometimes it's a miscommunication where it's one thing we joke a lot. It's like I said before, right page, wrong book. But if you're on the wrong page all the time and you're not communicating at all, that's where you have to go, okay, what in the world is going on? So what do we do when we find ourselves in these situations? Well, the first thing that you want to do is it's active listening. So like what we talked about before here, this is a monologue and a dialogue. You're hearing and listening what's going on, but is it active listening? Active listening, again, is that reiteration of, okay, I think what you're saying is this. Am I actually hearing you correctly? So like we recently had a thing where, don't ask me why I'm doing this now, but I decided to, instead of putting my toothbrush away where it needs to be put, I keep leaving it right on the counter next to the sink that we share. Well, she keeps trying to tell me, you really shouldn't have the toothbrush there. And I'm like, why do you keep bringing this up? This was actually a discussion we had last night. And I'm like, why do you keep bringing this stupid toothbrush?
Isn't that just like Satan?
Yeah.
The night before we're speaking on marriage
about this
lovely little
this dumb toothbrush. But what I wasn't hearing, and what I think you were saying to me was, this is nasty because you're leaving your toothbrush there and I'm washing my hand and I'm potentially getting nasty stuff on your toothbrush that you're putting in your mouth. And you shouldn't do that. I'm thinking of you, honey. I love you. You should really move that away. And I just want to leave my toothbrush alone and let me go about my day. But again, it's a small, funny thing like that where are you really hearing what's being said?
Well, so often what happens is someone, one of us is communicating, or we think we're communicating, and I'm not really listening. I'm already formulating what I think I need to say in response. And it's really important that we take a step back sometimes and recognize that this isn't a moment to fix the other person. We might think this is something we need to fix about him, that he puts his toothbrush away. But the reality is, it's for me to listen to what he's saying and understand why maybe that's something that's just not as important to him as it is to me. But I think it's really important that we recognize that we're truly taking a time, especially, we're making a joke about a toothbrush, but in reality, that is one of those little tiny things that if we're not careful, can really truly fester into something that can really at some point become a much bigger issue in our marriage. So with communication, we were looking at scripture, and you'll see that we had Ephesians 5:31 there, but the more we were talking this weekend, we were talking about the scripture about life and death being on our tongue. How many of you are familiar with that verse?
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys know what the verse is after that?
It's in Proverbs, by the way, Proverbs 18:21.
Have any of we were surprised to find when we actually went, and I was like, let's find that verse. Let's dig in and let's find that verse. The verse that follows that is about
He who finds a wife finds a good thing.
do you think those two verses go together on purpose?
So it was a cute thing. It made us smile. And again, do keep that in mind. The life and death are in the words that you choose with one another, with your kids, with your coworkers, with everybody. There's a lot of power in the words. The second warning light that we wanted to touch on, whoops, I went back too fast. There we go. Did I hit the right one? Yeah, the low fuel light. Again, if you don't have gas, the car doesn't go, right? That's a problem. So the low fuel light has to deal with your finances. And again, if you know the big three, communication is one, finances are the other one. And, when couples argue about money, sometimes it's not just about cash. It can be about trust, fear, and control in a relationship. And so, what can it look like if you've got some financial problems? Well, obviously, it can be a problem if the ends aren't meeting and you're going in debt. But in particular, with something like this, hiding purchases, secret accounts, every time a bill comes, you're anxious. That can be an indication that finances are a big thing with you guys, and you want to be careful with that. Have you ever been around people where it almost becomes a contest? I remember years ago, we were with a couple and the gentleman went out and made a large purchase and didn't tell her. Understandably, she was upset. So how would you rectify that situation? She went out and bought something just as expensive as he did, because if you're going to buy something for me, I'm going to buy something. If you're going to buy something for you, I'm going to buy something for me. Can anybody see where financially that might be a problem? I completely understand the sentiment. I think we all understand the sentiment of that. You went and did something without asking. I'm hurt, but doing the same thing is a good way, unless you're making a lot of money, that's a good way to make a big problem.
Well, and typically in a relationship, we always hear opposites attract, right? So 9 times out of 10, somebody comes into the relationship as the spender and somebody's the saver, right? And so in that, I think it's really important that you guys have a common goal. Right from the beginning, finances were incredibly tight for us. Young, married, purchased a home, teaching, student. We had all of our college debt and all of those different types of things. And so, every penny was accounted for. And it was really important to know where our dollars were going. The other thing was we recognized that we came from 2 very different families of origin when it came to finances. My parents prayed over every dollar. If you know my parents, then you probably know that about them. His parents were fairly new believers and were just very matter of fact. In fact, We put off our marriage, our wedding, 6 months because his parents presented some financial challenges that they didn't think we were prepared to we were prepared for, excuse me. So, I mean, it's important when it comes to finances that you get onto the same page. And again, this goes back to communication, because chances are good you come from two different thoughts, two different ways of spending money, whether it even is that you're a natural, spender or a natural saver, whatever the case might be. It's really important that you're sitting down and having a conversation so that you're moving towards the same goal. If your couple, as a couple, if your goal is to be debt free, then it's important that you know where those dollars are going. And so we had an agreement early on, and for everybody, it's going to be different. But this is, again, 30 plus years ago. But for us, it was $50. We didn't make a purchase over $50 without having spoken to the other person. And that's because our budget was pretty small. And so we really had to be very careful. I was somebody that couldn't handle the unknowns. And so I called very quickly in our marriage, I called every one of the bills that we had to pay and put them on a payment plan, because I wanted to know exactly where our dollars were going. And that way we didn't have any surprises when it came to dollars and cents.
And I would say one of the best things that helped our relationship is Sheila stayed home with the kids and I was working 7 days a week. And she said, what is one thing that I can do that would help? And I said, we have the money. If you could just pay the bills, that would be great. Because I was literally paying bills late because I was just tired and I wasn't making the payments. And what it helped to understand, we were so tight at that time. You've heard of paycheck to paycheck. We would go paycheck to paycheck, but being completely transparent, we would get that next paycheck and go, okay, let's pay the thing. We got to pay the mortgage. We got to pay the lights. We got to pay this one we can float if that's what we had to do. And what was incredibly helpful is she's one of the most frugal people that I've ever met. She's already started Christmas shopping and birthday shopping and all that kind of stuff. But what literally ended up happening at that point in time, she had planned ahead and made a bunch of small purchases, planning ahead, saving us a lot of money. But when it came time for a major bill, we couldn't pay it. And so it was incredibly, it wasn't a big deal. We were obviously able to get the money together and pay the bill. But having both of us on the same page and aware of what was going on was incredibly beneficial. So one of the things that's really helpful is financial transparency. Work together. I hope you have a shared budget. I know people have separate ones. If that works for you, that's great. But from what we were always taught is it's good to have your money together in a shared budget. Discuss what's going on, discuss the big purchases. So, like Sheila said, whether it's $50 or $100, or for you, it's $1,000, it doesn't matter. Whatever that is for you that you agree upon, if it's above this, we just need to give another person a heads up. Have you ever prayed over stuff? And that's what she talked about. She tells the story of her family sitting down at a table and literally praying for a meal to be delivered, correct? Because they didn't have the money. I came
groceries.
It was groceries. I grew up in a family that my dad, I'll just say, was a CPA. He did a lot of it, so very black and white. And he said, you know what, Tim, you're going to work all your life. You can pay and you can tithe when you get older. So for her, if she got a $10 bill and she found it in the parking lot, she'd tithe the dollar. For me, if I got $10, it went in my wallet and I never thought anything of it. But when you take those two and come together, right? It's different. It's a different approach. And that's $10 and $1. So what does it look with bigger stuff? So you need to be on the same page when it
Well,
comes
and that's
to that
again,
stuff.
like I said, I grew up in a family that prayed for everything, and Tim's family being fairly new believers. One of the first things, he now works at WHCF. And so for those of you that listen, fundraising is a very big aspect of that. And so that's what I knew growing up, and faith promise giving and all of those different types of things. So for me, it was a really big part of how can we pray to be a good steward with the dollars that God's blessed us with. And so I can remember saying, I really feel like we need to give whatever the amount might be. And that was something that was really new to Tim. And so this was something that in our marriage in particular, financially, we really had to work together so that we came together on being able to sit down and become givers together, and not it be me versus him. but us as a couple, and then even teaching that to our children.
And this is where the communication is so important. So whether it's a fundraiser, which has happened, recently things were going on. We were in a situation where we could donate a little bit more. And I can remember her calling in the middle of a fundraiser and saying, "Sweetheart, I really feel like God's encouraging me to do," we call it a challenge, where you put a certain money amount out and try to get people to match it. And I said, "Are you okay with that? I think this is what I'd like to do. Are you all right with that?" But we found out that it's incredibly important with your finances. When it's bigger items, make sure you're on the same page. If you're going to buy a car, if you're going to buy a house, I understand at the end of the day, if oversimplifying it, I understand the guy is the head of the house. I also understand that women are very intuitive and God has blessed you with that individual. And it has been my experience. And this is Tim's 2 pennies on the table. But if you're looking to do something and your spouse goes, "This is a bad idea, I'm not on board with you," I would strongly encourage you to maybe reconsider that decision. Because there's been some times we made an investment. I still remember it was a $5,000 investment, lost it all. But you know what? We were on the same page when we did it. And so would I still like my money back? I would. But you know what? We made that together. If you go out and buy a car and it's a lemon, the last thing you want is to go, "I told you not to buy that truck. I told you it was a piece of junk and you wouldn't listen to me." And before you know it, you got an issue. Whereas if you're on the same page, you're going to make great decisions and you high five and it's a celebration. And every now and then you're going to make poor decisions. But if you're at least together.
And there's a lot of tools and resources out there.
Oh my goodness, yes. Yeah.
Radio station forever has had different programs. We've had Financial Peace University. So I know there's a lot of resources that are out there. So if this is something that you struggle with, know that there are a lot of resources available to you. And we've kind of bounced around. And now, of course, with technology, we've got apps that can literally put your dollars right where you want them to go. So.
Yep. I've done soft budget, hard budget. I'm using Ramsey's Every Dollar app right now. Again, people use the envelope system. It doesn't matter what you do. Just make sure you're on the same page. Yeah. And that warning light hopefully won't come on quite as often. And then, of course, the scripture that goes with this is really important. Matthew 6:21, "For where your treasure is, there your heart is also." And you want to make sure that your money's going in the right place, right? And a good way to always make sure where your money's, if it's going in the right place, whether you're still filling out a checkbook or whether you got your app, take a peek at it. You'll know a lot about your heart and where it's going just by following the money sometimes. You'll know if you're doing what you want to do. The third engine light that could come on is your low oil pressure. Now, if I am not a car person, but I do know this: if the car has no oil, the engine don't work. I have learned that. It seizes up in a hurry. And in the same way, and this particular one is with intimacy, if the intimacy part of your relationship isn't going well, you can end up with a problem. Now, of course, just like with communication, when I say intimacy, instantly you're thinking of something. So that's the thing. What is intimacy? And I read this week. I think it was just a reel that somebody shared, but I thought it was pretty powerful. "I love you." That's not intimacy. Posting a photo, not intimacy. Knowing each other's passwords on all the accounts, it's not intimacy. Intimacy is when you can break down in front of one another and you don't say things like "calm down," "stop overreacting," "others have it worse." You stay quiet while they fall apart. You don't try to fix them. You don't try to lecture. You don't minimize the feelings. You're just there, you're present, and you're holding space. So when it comes to intimacy, when you truly define it, intimacy is physical and emotional oneness and closeness. Let me say that again. Intimacy is physical and emotional oneness and closeness. Because again, depending on who you're talking to, some people are going to hear intimacy and we're going to go, "Oh, well, that's the physical relationship." Absolutely, that is a part of it. But you'll also notice that the physical relationship and the physical intimacy is going to labor if there's not the emotional closeness as well, right? The two have to work in tandem. And if they don't, intimacy can be a challenge.
Absolutely. You know, and the last thing that you want to do is just end up being roommates, you know? And so with this, I think it's important that we are having connection and communication in this regards, so that we know what the other person's love language is and knowing what their need is in this particular department.
Absolutely. We laughed when you first got married. We were married at 21 years old, and there was a couple probably younger than us, but at the time they looked really old. And I remember somebody, it was actually your teacher.
So I'm a Liberty University grad, and my health professor actually talked in health class in regards to intimacy. And so he made the comment that he and his wife put a heart on each. They sat down, and in their monthly calendar, they literally planned to make sure that they were taking time for each other, and they would put a little heart on each other's calendar. And I remember everyone in the room kind of looked at each other thinking, you know, at 20 years old, we don't really need a heart. We don't need to be reminded. And yet we've laughed about that now over the course of 30 years, that really, as life gets busy, you know, if we're not careful, the person who matters the most to us gets the least from us. And so we really need to make sure that when we're scheduling our time, which we're going to talk a little bit about, but in this area in particular, that we're really making sure that we're putting time for each other on the calendar first.
Sheila mentioned this, the love languages. I'm sure you've heard this with Gary Chapman, but making sure I hit them all. It's touch, words, time, service, or gifts. Know what they are, pour into it. Have you ever asked your spouse what they think your love language is? I thought that was interesting. I would have bet the house that my love language is physical touch. And it is, but she countered and said, you know what? I think words or affirmation are a love language. And I was like, you're insane. What are you talking about?
This is quite a few years
Long time ago. I'm in my 20s. And I'm like, you're nuts. I don't see this at all. But I started paying attention to it and realized, golly, words of affirmation. I didn't even see my love language. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. She picked up on it before me. And as you know, with the love languages, the challenge with the love language is you have a tendency to try to speak your love language. And like I can remember, so again, physical touch, words of affirmation, I'm out mowing the yard. Do you know why I was mowing the yard? To show her that I loved her. So I came inside and the yard looked really good. And guess what? She didn't say anything. It hurt my feelings. Words of affirmation. I just made the lawn look good for you. And it was a wonderful conversation at that time for her to say, words of affirmation are not my love language. I just want you to come in here and sit on the couch with me and spend time with me. It's been a busy week. And I was like, oh, well, that's good to know. I had no idea.
And for those of you who aren't aware, are you all familiar with love languages? I mean, love languages that book's been out for, a long, long time. Well, they've actually just written a part 2 because Gary Chapman realized in all of the years that he's been doing counseling that as important as the love languages are, the second book is about love languages. We might know each other's love language, but be speaking the wrong dialect. So the month of January, actually on TBN, they broke that down, so there's a brand new book. If you haven't seen it, you can see me after and we can go through that as a resource. But I think that's one of those areas, like you might know your spouse's love language and you might be trying to please them in a way, but not actually be connecting because you might not be on the right aspect of their love language. And so I thought that was interesting.
And it may be alarming to you, but in the whole dialect thing, you do realize there's physical touch and then there's physical touch, right? The other spouse's love language could be physical touch, but it doesn't mean that that's sex. That could just mean what some of you are doing here, holding hands, putting an arm around one another,
Rubbing my feet.
Rubbing her feet.
Rubbing my back.
With no strings attached. That's the love. You know, we laugh, but I mean, Right language, wrong dialect. It would be nice if we could have both. It doesn't always work that way, though. Again, when it comes to your love language, that's incredibly important. And one of the other things that we found with that is to ask a simple question: how can I fill your love tank? What is there anything that I could do to fill your love tank? And the nice thing is sometimes it's like, no, I'm good. I'm all fine. Or sometimes it would be, yeah, could you just sit down? It's been a busy week. Could we just reconnect? It's little things like that. All right. So the fourth light in your vehicle is the overheating life. And maybe you can relate to this one. This is the work-life balance. And I'm sure you now know we live in a dual income world. So, everybody's working, everybody's busy, whether it's just you guys, then you're serving. If you got kids, if you're taking care of parents, the schedule is just insanely busy. But sometimes the warning signs is when your life is just plain too full, the marriage overheats. Like you're present, but you're not. And I don't mean sitting at other sides of the couch sending reels to one another. We all do that, it feels like. But what I'm talking about is you're actually in the room, but you're not in the room. You're physically there, but you're not there because you can't stop dealing with the other part of what's going on in your life because you are just too crazy busy.
Well, and I'm a multitasker. Tim is one job at a time. And I don't know if that's how it is in your relationship, but my mind is I can often have 7 plates spinning all at the same time. And that is not always a good thing. And so when he needs me to be present, my mind might be spinning and thinking of all the different things, but recognizing that we need to be intentional and take time. And I think for many, our phones have only created a more difficult aspect with this. I think we joke about it, but I can't tell you how often we could be sitting at a family event and you lift your head up and every single person in the room is sitting on their phones, scrolling through reels. And it's not meant to be that way. I don't think we mean to clock out, right, or check out. But if we're not careful, that can become the norm. And so this is one of those areas where we tried to be intentional to take time on a regular basis to just kind of check in, keep our calendars. For us, it was keeping a master calendar. I was one, and now, of course, there's so many technology things that you can do where you can put everybody's calendar in different colors and all color coded on your apps and things like that. For me, it was just an old-fashioned magnetic calendar on my refrigerator. It was in 4 separate strips. And we tried to literally go in and put everything on that calendar once a week and be able to sit down and talk about, because I'm somebody, I don't like to say no to people, right? Do any of you struggle to say no? I'm a pleaser. I'm a pleaser by nature. And so if somebody asks me to do something, I would say yes. And it took me a long time in life to recognize that it's okay to sometimes say no. And it could be to some really good things. But if you're overcommitted, that's not in the best interest of your marriage or in your family. And so for us, we tried to put things on a calendar so we could physically see if it wasn't. And that doesn't mean that we weren't spontaneous. I don't want you to think that we didn't have spontaneous things come up. But for the most part, in order to keep the balance, we tried to be able to look out. But we did it even with the kids, right down to like meal plan. I would let the kids choose a couple nights a week because that kind of helped keep the peace if someone didn't want one meal or the other. But we tried to just put a lot of those things on that calendar mapped out. And we could even see when one of those days or one of those weeks was so full, we would know, okay, it's time to press pause. It's time to we got to step back from something. He still coaches, I coach. Like we've always been busy doing something. And so it's hard to find the balance sometimes if we're not careful.
Right. If you have you ever said it's a season, but the season never ends? It's not a season. You're too busy. And so whether you need Google Calendar to see that or whether you want to kick it old school and put some, but like with her, when we were constantly flipping the calendar up there and every week it's full, and there's no time, that's not a season. That's life. And eventually you got to figure out, okay, we got to be able to do something to free up some time. The other thing that's incredibly important when it comes to your work-life balance, and I will readily admit I'm awful at this, but and I know pastors talked about this recently, is the Sabbath. How do you do with Sabbath and resting? And let's not split hairs whether it's a Saturday or a Sunday here. The reality is, are you resting? I don't rest. I feel guilty sitting down and doing nothing. But sometimes you need to put some margin in your schedule to rest. And whether that's 15 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, and maybe you're saying, but Tim and Sheila, I have, and fill in the blank, whatever it is. I mean, like if you've got pets, if you've got kids, if you've got hobbies or whatever it is, sometimes, I mean, she was a master of saying, like, she even told me her parents would make everybody take a nap on a Sunday, even when they were teenagers.
I hated it. And now I wish somebody would tell me I could go take a nap. But the reality is my parents, Sunday was a day of rest. And so it was family dinner. We had family. We would rush from church to Bucksport to have Sunday dinner with the family. But as soon as we were done, it was home, it was rest, it was quiet before we came back to church Sunday evening. And so I now see that as an adult and understand and appreciate, that they took the time to instill that in us. Because I think we now live in a day and age where busyness is something that we almost wear with a badge of honor, right? We like to be busy. I think Pastor Adam talked about it a few Sundays ago. But the reality is we can be busy doing a lot of things, and it is okay to have that rest. I think it's really great to have people in your life that can speak that into you. I'm grateful that I have some women in my life that can do that. And I had shared with a friend a prayer that I had in 2025 that God just has not answered, or at least hasn't felt like he's answered. And as I was sharing with a good friend of mine, she said, Sheila, sometimes you have to be still. You have to be still to hear God answer. And it was just that reminder that maybe I was a little too busy, maybe I had a little too much on my plate, that maybe I need to take some time. So when it comes to this work-life balance, I think it's important that we sit down as a couple and make sure that, again, we're on the same page. What is our goal? What is the goal that we're working towards? Recognizing that we're on the same team, we're working towards the same common thing. So this is a constant, this is not something a one and done. You know what I mean? This is something that regardless of what season of life you're in, this is a constant check-in that we have to do on a regular basis.
And again, no shock. It's Psalm 46, verse 10, be still and know that I am God. Be still. And I'll own that. That's probably the hardest thing of the whole evening for me. I don't be still well at all. Another light that can come on is your battery light. Now, if you've ever had an issue with your battery, what you know with the battery is that everything in the car dims. And this is attached to your spiritual connection and ministry. And I love that picture of things dimming, because the reality is if your spiritual life isn't in the right place, the light's not going to shine. It's going to be a very, very dim light that you're leading, and that's not what you want. I mean, you may notice, what could it look like? We're not praying together at all, or not nearly as much as we used to. We're skipping church. We're spiritually dry. We're disconnected. And on this topic right here, what if Sheila and I could offer you the silver bullet? What if I could give you the marriage bullet that would, statistically speaking, guarantee that none of you in this room would get divorced? None of you. Would you be interested? You've heard of it before, right? A family that stays together, prays together, but have you heard the numbers? Can anybody tell me what the actual numbers are? Some of you would cheat, Jen Whitcomb. I know you know.
Some of you have heard us say this.
Has anybody heard, sincerely, does anybody know the numbers? What percentage of people in this room pray together?
This is according to Barnes.
This is according to Barnum. What percentage of couples pray together? Guesses? Say again. Good guess. That's actually pretty darn close. 8%. 8% of couples pray together. Of the 8% that consistently pray together, what percent gets divorced? Less than 1%. Do that math. That's kind of crazy. 8% of us pray together consistently. Of the 8%, less than 1% get divorced. And there's your mullet. There's your silver bullet for the whole evening right there. If you guys can somehow find a way to consistently spend time together in prayer, it's almost divorce proof in your relationship.
But if
And
it
yet
were that easy, we've always said, if it were just that easy, why don't we do it more often, right? And it's because, it really goes back to some of the things that we were talking about, and again, if we aren't being intentional, boy, you can really get off base and not even realize it. So this idea of praying together, it sounds so simple, and yet it's probably one of the most difficult things, because Satan's going to do everything. The phone's going to ring, the baby's going to cry, whatever. You sit down to open your Bible for devotions. Am I the only person? I swear, it's like you instantly invite whatever. Or, that's all of a sudden when your brain thinks of all the things that you have to do.
And it's not bad stuff. This could be the work could be calling. Our in-laws are in Florida. They reached out and called. Our daughter is in Florida. She's FaceTiming us. And so we get to see our granddaughter. But it's amazing the moment that you sit down to do that.
The moment we sat down to go over this material, the phone rang.
Yes, it's crazy. It's just funny how it works out that way. The thing is we live in a day and age, though, where you have so many options. So first of all, you'll hear this as a common theme. Find the time that works for you. I'm a morning person. It's not going to work at 5 a.m. for her. 10 at night, I'm useless. I'm like Pastor Jerry. When this thing's over with, I'm ready to go to bed, man. I'm starting to wind down. So you have to try to figure that time that works for you. But there are so many resources out there. There's if you, obviously, back in the day, it was the Daily Bread, and it was your Bible itself that you have, which is, of course, awesome. But there are so many things. The YouVersion Bible app. There are so many different devotions that you can use there. We've been using the Bible recap with Tara Lee Cobble, which has kept us reading the same verses every day, which what a grind the book of Leviticus was, by the way, if you've not been through there lately. Wow.
And we don't necessarily have the same time to sit down and do that together, but it's nice that we're independently doing that, and we can sit, and when we're walking, we can talk through the different aspects of what we've been reading together.
So it's not only the devotional time, the prayer time, but serve together as a team. Hopefully you can find something that you like to be able to do that. Find a ministry, whether it's support, whether it's teaching, whether it's hosting or serving or mentoring. There are so many different lanes.
Well, and one of the things I want to slide in here is when it comes to ministry, your marriage is the frontline ministry to your children. They are watching. You, probably the number one ministry that you have is that we have the opportunity to model a covenant marriage to our children. And if it's not our children, maybe it's our nieces and nephews, whatever that looks like, but we get to be a firsthand, whether it's to coworkers. Your marriage is a ministry. People are watching, and they are taking note when they see something that is different.
Ecclesiastes 4:12 says, a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. And what an illustration that is. It's not just the two of us. When you include God in the equation, what a game changer it is in your life and in your marriage. And I hope you can find a way to make time. And again, I would love to sit up here and say that we've executed this flawlessly, and we haven't. Just like with you guys, you have ebbs and you have flows. And when you flow out of that, the light dims, and that's not a good thing. The sixth light is the tire pressure light. Not very good at cars again, but I do know this much. If the tire pressure goes down and you don't have a flat tire, what does the car do? Starts to pull, starts to drift. The tire starts to wear down. And in the same way that your car can drift, your relationship will drift if you guys aren't together when it comes to family unity and parenting unity, regardless of what that looks like. Obviously, if you got kids, got to be on the same page. But it's just for you as a unit. How do you function with the in-laws? We have different families of origin. And that's always an interesting thing. Are you unified? Are you on the same page? For me, my family moved to New Jersey when I was 7 years old. Do you know what family was around me? My mom and my dad. That was it. Then I moved up here and everything, like every weekend.
Every event was a big family event.
Everything.
So he couldn't understand, I would say, well, the family's getting together. And he's like, we were just together like 2 days ago. What do you mean? And I couldn't understand when he would say, well, no, we're not going to go this time. And I was like, you don't understand. Like, you don't not go. Like, it's a family event. But it's one of those things when it comes to family and parenting. At a very young age, kids can see the cracks and they can even get in there. We just had lunch with our kids this afternoon, our grandkids. And it's funny how a 3-year-old knows to already start playing against. She'll go to Bambi and ask if she can do something if she didn't like the answer that she got from mom, dad, Gigi, whoever it is. She's going to go until until we stay unified as a front and be like, what did mom say? What did dad say? Like, kids just know. Like, you don't have to teach them to do that. They are going to instinctively divide if they can. And it's really important that we're moving in the same direction. And we were, early on in our marriage, with Tim working and me being at home, he was working 7 days a week. And so it came down to, I was the disciplinary because I didn't want it to be that you wait until your dad gets home thing. I kind of had that growing up and I didn't like that scenario. And so I really felt like it was important that I dealt with the situation, unless it was a big situation, that we had as the kids got older or whatever the case might be. But then it got to the point where it felt like I was the bad guy and he was the good guy. Like, he was the one who got to have fun. Do you ever see that happen? And so there came a time where we had to sit down and be like, okay, we need to figure out a way to unify on this so that it is not one is always the disciplinary and one is always the fun guy. And so this is one of those areas just to have constant conversation, because this is going to be constantly evolving as your kids grow. Our kids are now grown and out of the house. But, as they got to their teen years and later teen, whatever the case might be, we had to make sure that we were on the same page when it came to what we thought was acceptable for them to do, or the boundaries. Let me put it that way, the guardrails that we were trying to put for them as they were growing.
And as nice as it is for them to play the parents and eventually get their way, I mean, there's something to structure. There's something to unity. And if you've ever been in a household where the parents weren't on the same page, as fun as it was to play them and get what you wanted from the same standpoint, that didn't give you a lot of confidence as a kid. There's shockingly something to a unified front that actually is really good for your kids, that you're on the page together. But you got to have the conversation. What are you going to do when it comes to discipline and spiritual training and boundaries and all those things? And what's going to happen is it's going to change, right? What you're going to find out is you may get a rhythm while they're up to 4 years old, and then something changes. And then you're in a rhythm until they hit the teenage years. Like Sheila has often said, I don't know what it was about the age of 14. But 14 was that year where...
For each of our kids in totally different ways. It just was a growing year. It was a challenging year, let's say that.
Yeah.
But it was not a bad thing, but we had to stop and pause and recognize no two kids are the same, right? What you did for one doesn't necessarily work for the second one, and so on and so forth. And so it was really important for us to have check-in times and not be divided. Especially now, there's so many kids going in sports. Our kids were always involved in sports. We tried to pick and choose which ones our kids did so that we weren't going too much. But there were definitely seasons in our marriage where literally we packed up and one went one direction and one went the other direction with, opposite kids. And it's like we would meet back 2 days later and reevaluate whatever happened. So it's just definitely one of those things, when it comes to the parenting, when it comes to family, I just can't encourage you enough to make sure that this is where you're still dating. Show your kids, we tried to even date our kids, teach them, mom would take, I would take Cody on a date and he would take Ashley on a date. And I think it was important for them to see that we were still dating. And we joked about one of the times that Ashley must have thought it was time for us to have a date night. And she had gone downstairs without us knowing. And she had decorated a little table and she had created food for us to go down and have our little date. And we looked at each other like, oh no, we have to eat what's in front of us.
I remember that.
And it was like caramel dipped pepperonis. And I don't even know what the concoction was, but we laughed about the fact that we were thankful in that moment that at least we knew we were modeling that it was important for us to still be going on a date because she wanted something special for us in that moment.
And understand, obviously, your marriage isn't going to be perfect, but the hope is that you're modeling a healthy, God-centered marriage, that they can see that God is the focus of it, and that that's something they can model moving forward. The last warning light is the stability control light. When we heard, anybody know what the stability control light was?
I literally said, I have no idea what this is.
At least in my Jetta, it was the little squiggly thing. You know what I'm talking about? The squiggly thing. What that means, the squiggly thing may be what you deal with Monday if you try to drive out of your driveway with all the snow on it. It means your wheels are spinning, right? That's the stability light. Well, this could be for your emotional health. And the good news is, I think we now live in a time where emotional health is something that we actually talk about. When I grew up, I'd never heard of such a thing.
No.
But nowadays, at least it's on the table and we recognize it. And so what can it look like? You know, when emotions run unchecked, I mean, the beautiful thing is none of you are robots. We're all people. We all have feelings and emotions. But if emotions are driving the train, you got a problem, right? That's one of the things I always tell my baseball players. Yes, I expect you to be emotional. That's great. If you hit a home run, you ought to be excited. But if you're fueled by emotions, you ever been, maybe you're an emotional person. I was as a child. And you know what I was? I was up and I was down. I was up and I was down. When you're driven by emotions, emotions are a wonderful part of your body, but the emotions can't be in control. If you're driven by the emotions, that's a problem. And so what can that look like when they're driving the ship? Well, if they're driving the car, you could be dealing with anxiety and resentment, depression. All of those things can take over. And I know we recently had a great turnout for anxiety.
The seminar that we did back in the fall. And so it was really nice to hear from our own church professionals who just shared some really valuable tips on how do we deal with anxiety in today's society, because probably there isn't anyone that we don't know that isn't dealing with something. And to be able to recognize that, I think as a church, too often we just said, well, we need to pray about it, or you're not trusting enough. But to recognize that there's some physical aspects that can take place if we don't deal with it. And so to know that we have some amazing resources that we can tap into, I think is really important. And I know for us in our marriage, this was something that we had to deal with. Tim had some things that kind of came to the surface after the death of a loved one, and just couldn't understand why he couldn't get in control of some of these emotions that were really just beginning to just come out of nowhere. And it wasn't healthy for him. And it certainly, was difficult for us to maneuver together. And we recognized it was bigger than what we could deal with on our own.
Yeah, I can only give you, I met with Loida, for those of you that know her, and she's for years had said, I'll be happy to talk to you anytime. And I'm like, no, never. And I just got to the point where I guess I'm a combination of very analytical, but also quite emotional. And I got to the point where I couldn't think straight. I didn't know what the heck was going on, other than I was all over the place and I couldn't process anything. And I was just a mess. And so I actually got her phone number and called her up and just said, look, I got to talk. I don't know what's going on, but and she just helped me navigate it all. And it was game changing for me. It makes me emotional thinking about it. It was incredibly helpful. So I would never minimalize anybody's emotional health. If you find yourself, you're struggling, if it's that time of the year where it's dark and cold and you deal with seasonal affective disorder, don't ignore it. Talk to your spouse about it. And this is where we need healthy communication. Don't try to minimize stuff. When somebody's laboring like that, hear what they're trying to say. And obviously, the first thing we want to do is we want to support one another. We want to pray together. That goes without saying. But here with Pastor Gary, we have a staff here that can help you. If you've got challenges, don't ignore that. Your emotional health is incredibly important. And one of the first things that it requires is that in emotional honesty, be able to be honest with one another, to hear what's being said, to not judge, to not dismiss. It's not a big deal. It'll pass. It might, but that's probably not going to lead to what you're looking for.
Right. So, with that, just to be able to ask your spouse, are you okay? And then to pause and to listen and to hear, like to actually take account to what they're dealing with and going through that. So we've been very grateful for the resources that we have here. So, as we're wrapping up these different warning lights, if you stop and think, I mean, probably every single one of you, if you go and you actually take that analogy of the car, if you stop and think, how often do you have to do a tune-up? How often do you have an oil change? How often do you rotate the tires? Like when we were going through these things, I think too often when it comes to marriage, we wait until we're in crisis. We wait until we're in trouble, and then we want somebody to help save us. And so if we can recognize, we wish way back in our early years, somebody had actually just given us the tools to be able to say, it's okay to recognize that there's just maintenance that needs to be done.
Right.
And there's a lot of resources. I know there's the Weekend to Remember is coming up. I don't know how many of you have ever gone to that, but it's something that we had done through the years. But I mean, know that this is something that if you can even just take this visual, I teased Pastor Adam that I really wanted a car on the stage. I wanted to make a big.
She really did.
Impact. I did everything in my power to try and put a car on the stage because I thought it was just such a powerful visual of recognizing that if we want our car to last, if we want it to, we take care of it. We're washing it, we're cleaning the salt off of it. The car washes are full this time of year. Why? Because people are taking care and doing the maintenance. And so it is good to invest and take regular maintenance and care of your marriage because it's the most precious gift that we have. So we're going to take the next, 10 to 15 minutes. You've got some handouts there. I know if you've taken some notes, but we'd really love for you guys to we're going to play some music, encourage you to just kind of sit down, go through these 7 areas, and maybe even just talk about maybe something that stood out to you, something that maybe we said, or maybe something that you thought of that you guys want to start implementing in your marriages.
At this point, we encourage you to pause the podcast and take some time to talk through the questions together. Don't rush it, and when you're ready, come back and hit continue.
All right. Hopefully that gave you a time to at least get through some of it, start the conversation. Obviously, you can continue it later on in the evening, but we wanted to wrap this up by just, in the same way with your vehicle, you would have like routine maintenance that you do. There are certain things every year, every month, there are certain things you got to do. This time of year, if you've got an older vehicle, it feels like I'm putting air in the tire more and more consistently. So when it comes to your routine maintenance checklist, we've got some things daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly, just as suggestions for you. So daily, we'd encourage you to do your very, very best to pray together, even if it's briefly, even if it's at a meal. Don't just pray for the meal, but you can express the other thing that's going on. Even ask your kids around the table, what's something that we can pray for? Or would you please pray for this about me? And another wonderful habit to get into, especially if you can be a half glass empty person, share something you're gratitude about, that you're thankful for. Share a gratitude, share something that's an affirmation, and try to do that on a daily basis. It builds a great habit. On a weekly basis, we encourage you to do some intentional us time. Do a date, a devotion, or a walk. That's one thing that works really well for us. It's amazing how much we talk when we're actually walking side by side next to one another. Weekly, review your week. What brought you joy? What caused you stress? And it's a great way to just share your heart of what's going on a consistent basis, so you're staying close to one another. On a monthly basis, discuss your goals, your finances, your intimacy, family alignment. I do the finances most of the time, and I try to give her like at the end of the month, hey, just so you know, here's where we're at. This was a month we did really well, or wow, we had a lot of expenses this month. This is what it looked like. Just try to stay on the same page. Also, celebrate progress. Celebrate the small wins, no matter what it was. Celebration is a great thing. And then on a yearly basis, if you can, take a retreat or a getaway. Renew the vision and focus on God's plan for your marriage. Sheila is really good going into the year, trying to find a word for the year, a verse for the year. a plan. In fact, she does an amazing job keeping us on task. That's a strength of hers. Also, seek counsel or mentorship. If you notice recurring warning lights, we hope that's one of the big takeaways from this is that you're not here because you're married. I mean, your marriage could be in a difficult spot, but the idea is the tire light came on. Don't wait until you're driving around on your rims, right? You're out of tire, you're out of air. Put a little bit of air in it and deal with that on a consistent basis. And hopefully you're going to get the results that you want.
There's resources out there if you don't even know where to start. We were, for years, Tim just never liked to read. I was the reader. And so I'd be like, underlining and, hand this off to him and be like, you read it. Now we've got podcasts, now we've got a lot of different resources available to us. Just make sure that you're careful with who you're giving influence to. I think that's one of the things when we really dug into the area of marriage. Some of them you've got to be careful. We've brought a few with us this evening that really have spoken to us, ones that we've really enjoyed. You heard us mention Greg. Is it Greg Smalley?
Yeah, Greg Small.
He and his wife, is it Aaron? Greg, and I'm terrible with names sometimes when it comes. I know the names of the books, and I'm very bad at remembering who the author was. They're on a lot on Focus on the Family. You can hear them on a regular basis. One that we really have enjoyed is Fierce Marriage. There's a Fierce Marriage podcast, but it's run by husband and wife Ryan and Selena Frederick. And one of the things that we really enjoyed about this particular aspect is this is written from both the men and the women's perspective. When we dug into marriage, it seemed like most of the marriage books that were out there were written by one viewpoint. And they might hit on, my wife's thoughts, or there might be a little sublet in a chapter. But this actually, a lot of their books are actually written entirely from each of their perspectives. And when they do the podcast together. And so they're ones that we've really enjoyed. I brought a few of those books up here. But that might be someplace for you to start. Like if you don't know where to start the conversation, if this idea of doing regular maintenance is something that is new to you, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for some of the different sources that we have available. One of the things that we're really looking to do, Pastor Adam mentioned when we got started this evening, is that we're really looking to dig into investing into our marriages here in the church. And one of the ways that we'd like to do that is with a mentorship program. And it's not something scary. It's really just something to have somebody who's walked a little further ahead of you in life, that's maybe walked through the seasons that maybe you're coming into, that you can just be able to come alongside and talk with them, meet with them, ask questions of them. It's not counseling. It's not for counseling or therapy. It truly is a mentorship. And we've got a handful of couples that are ready to start that. And so for any of you who are finding yourselves in a spot that you just would really like to have somebody's wisdom, we were very fortunate. I'll tell you this, and it probably sounds a little scary for those of you, in the room that have already planned your weddings. But I came home from college and my mother had put our wedding invitation in the church bulletin here at church. And imagine trying to plan your wedding and not knowing who was going to show up. And so all of those years ago, that was kind of a surprise to me when I came home from college and I found all these people that I didn't know were coming to my wedding. But I'll tell you a little blessing that came from that. As we got married early on, we had older couples that would just walk by and say to us, "Hey, you guys still holding hands?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you guys still dating? Praying for you guys." Different couples, when kids entered the picture, we had an older couple, just a little, they were maybe, 7, 8 years ahead of us in life, but that would take our kids on a regular basis and give us a date night because, finances weren't there to just, be able to go on dates as often as we wanted to. And even still, we have some older couples in the church that send us cards that say, "We're praying for you." And so to know that somebody is investing in us, like through the years, or just thinking of us, has really meant a lot to us. And so in terms of mentorship, that's one of the areas that we would like to have a community where we're paying attention to those around us here in the church. We've got a large church. We're really excited to see. We didn't know how many would show up this evening. So we're grateful that you guys are here, but we're really excited to kind of dig into having seasons where we're doing some intentional mentorship. And so that's something that we have on the horizon. And like I said, we've got about a handful of couples who are excited to jump into that with us and move forward in 2026.
Yep. So certainly be praying for that. And again, understand it's not counseling. It's not therapy or anything like that. It's just a mentor, somebody that's been there and done that and maybe can impart some wisdom. So, if you want a mentor, if you'd like a mentor, let the pastoral staff know. And it's something that we'd like to see get going in our church and encourage one another in our relationships, because you're not alone. You've got a lot of people in this room and we're all at different stages in our relationship. And what a wonderful blessing that would be to just help each other out, to know that we're here to link arms, to be an encouragement. And I can still see that one couple, that Cliff and Stella Rockwell, for those, if there's anybody here that's been in the church a very long time, they, again, at that time, they looked like they were 100 years old. I'm sure they were my age, but at that age, when I was 21, they looked that old. And I can remember them walking down until the day they went home to be with the Lord. I can still see them sitting right up in this part of the church. And I thought to myself,
Holding hands
that's
the
what I
entire
want to be.
way.
That's what I want to be. When I'm old and I can't move, I want to be walking hand in hand and sitting there. They were the cutest little couple, and they were the ones that would walk in. Is the honeymoon still on? They were the cutest couple ever. But again, I can't even tell you how much their encouragement meant. I mean, it makes me emotional just thinking about them. And that's really what we'd like to see continue in our church. So thank you guys again for coming. And if you don't mind, I'll just wrap it up in prayer. God, we just thank you for these couples coming together, investing in their relationships, God. And we just pray that you would help us to look at the maintenance life. Help us not to be a statistic, God. Help us to be praying couples. Help us to model as best we can to our kids, to our community, and to our church, a healthy marriage that is focused on you, God. And I just pray that you would bless these men and women here tonight. Bless their marriages, Lord. Pray that you would be with them and help us to grow. And we ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, guys.